Did you also have the topic of self responsibility you wanted to talk about?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. So I'm seeing this with I guess maybe the left more than the way more than the right. 'Cause the right's more like self responsibility. I mean,
Mm.
they can say, oh, we can kill the Jews, but at least I'll take the responsibility for it. Meanwhile, the left is kind of like, yeah, but like but it was this and this and this that made it led up to this, and therefore he's not responsible. And
Yeah,
it's
I
kind of like,
mean, I have a lot to say on self responsibility and like the left denying it in general. Um, it's really a hard topic to tackle because again, this is like pinning, right against left directly. But I don't get where self responsibility left the left because um, there's this guy who's pretty popular, Jordan Peterson. You've probably heard of him. And that's probably like the number one thing he's preached over the years. And what got him popular was like self responsibility and like just fulfillment in life of, if you have self responsibility, you can take control of your life and, do what you want. And, obviously that's a conservative line of thinking. But at the end of the day, I believe it to be pretty much true. I think that especially if you grow up in the West, you have opportunities that present themselves to you. And of course, some people need to put forth more responsibility and more time and effort than others. That's 100% true. But at the end of the day, I think you can accomplish what you want to in life with self-responsibility, and hard work and dedication. But it seems like people on the left kind of are more stagnant in that way, or just more like conceding to the fact of like, oh, if you're not successful, or oh, if you don't, accomplish your dreams, it's not your fault. When a lot of times you could probably say it kind of was your fault. Maybe if you studied 30 more minutes a night, you might have passed that test. And if you passed that test, you might have passed that class. And if you passed that class, you might have got that degree, and then you might have got that dream job. I can't really agree with anyone on the left who would say, like, oh, yeah, you don't have to study more because that's based on the environment you grew up in. That makes no sense.
um, yeah. Typically speaking, though, I hear the argument goes, well, something like this. Are you aware of what determinism is?
Hmm.
Well, philosophically speaking, it kind of goes like, well, you're not like, you're not, you don't have free will, so every action you do is predetermined. And with that line of reasoning, you can say, well, you're not responsible for any action you do after the setback.
Yes.
Um, that is kind of a dangerous thought to have, for many people. Typically, I find it relatively not really that scary of a thought, just an interesting one at that. I do believe in determinism, but I still hold myself responsible for each thing I do. Typically speaking, I would say hiding behind a deterministic world for
Yeah.
your actions is rather a self-fulfilling prophecy of your own downfall.
Exactly. I think I couldn't have agreed more with you in that place. I think a lot of people tend to use determinism as an excuse for committing heinous crimes, and like, well, this person was just a puppet of the Big Bang or whatever. Um, so they hold no responsibility. Uh,
Yeah.
but the problem there is they're separating cause and effect. And that I think that's a dangerous ground. Like I don't know where they get the ability to do that. Is like when they're saying, oh, the community shouldn't take revenge from this person because basically they were just a puppet of the Big Bang. The Big Bang made them do whatever they did, and we
Well,
should
with
keep
that
that
line,
into account. Yeah.
yeah, but even with that line of reasoning, if we kill them, we're not responsible for such
Exactly,
killing them.
exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. So the
Yeah.
thing is they're splitting cause and effect. They're saying effect is free willed, and we are choosing to kill this person who were just a mere puppet of the Big Bang. But they fail to understand that we are all part, in that respect, results of the Big Bang. So if I choose to feel vengeful, or a member of the community chooses to is vengeful for what happened, for the action that happened, even though that action was determined by the Big Bang, the vengeful thought that the person that wants the death penalty implemented is also programmed by the Big Bang. So what? Why would the Big Bang be a factor? It's a non sequitur in that situation because it affects both cause and effect. It's kind of like saying,
Yeah.
like the rock rolled down the boulder, the boulder rolled down the hill because of gravity. But when my teapot fell off the table, that wasn't because of gravity. It's like all things are always been affected by gravity. So if gravity is the
Yeah.
reason that you're gonna give to explain the person never had any motives. It's just their brains were just ticking over like a robot, and the robot just malfunctioned, or that's just how it was programmed by the Big Bang. But we are not robots of the Big Bang. We're not puppets of the Big Bang. We should be more, I guess, thoughtful in that sense, and we should say, well, yeah, this person was not acting according to free will, but we somehow are, and we should change our vengeful ways or whatever to not be vengeful. It's like, why are you separating that? Like, if
Yeah.
my brain chemistry also warrants revenge, then how can you say that what the person did to initiate that vengeful emotion within me is somehow excused because of the Big Bang, but the vengeful emotions that have been evoked in me are somehow not a result of the Big Bang because I'm somehow
Well,
above the Big Bang, and it's
determinism should be viewed as a moral, I guess, neutral entity because
yeah. It's
at
like
the end of
gravity.
the
I think
yeah,
it's a descriptive fact of nature. It can never be used for prescription. Otherwise, you commit a
yeah.
naturalistic fallacy. You just say, well, nature's at play, therefore, and it's one of those things that it just applies across the board, so it just doesn't bring anything to the table. Like, it's just saying, well, people are just committing actions because the Big Bang made them do so. It's just cause and effect. It's like, yeah, well, if the cause of the vengeful thought was this heinous act, then this is the effect, which has also been predetermined. So
Well,
let's not waste
I
time
would
even
say
talking about that.
the average person that knows about determinism, though, I mean, the average person has a hard time taking responsibility for their own actions for the most part,
Yes,
or admitting they were wrong. Don't get me wrong; I struggle with admitting I'm wrong
right.
sometimes, right? All of us
Yes,
do.
yes.
But I feel like in order for someone, right, on the left
Mm-hmm.
to sit there and pretty much, I guess, maybe try to use said argument to scapegoat the death penalty would be
Yeah, it's
a dumb
insane.
idea.
Like I was saying, it's a complete non sequitur in the moral argument because this is the thing that at its bedrock, morality is implicated on the fact that we're agents. What's the difference between, say, like a rock, just rolling down the hill and crushing a person, a man, versus someone pushing the boulder to kill someone they hate, a man they hate, and that boulder goes and crushes the whole justice system is predicated on the fact that we're moral agents. Like criminality is 90% intent, 10% action. So if there's no
Well,
intent, usually the people get away scot-free. So like something like manslaughter, for example, is something that falls under that thing. Like the person didn't have, they lost the ability to, there wasn't a cold-blooded murder. It was like, oh, it was just a heat of the moment thing. They didn't want to do it. It's just they couldn't help it. So we have degrees of intent. So does someone calculatingly kill somebody? Does it happen as an accident, just like, they saw red and they did something they regret or didn't want to do or didn't plan to? Then there's accidental death where, someone just runs somebody over in a car or vehicle or whatever. Then you have something that's completely natural, like a bushfire. Like, if there's a fire that's happening in the forest and people die, you're not going to say, well, nature killed people, because there's no intent to nature. So if the whole process of criminality and morality in general is upstanding because of agency. If you take away agency and start saying, "Oh, everything's just happening as a robot," like, or like if everything is literally just programmed by the Big Bang, then morality just serves no purpose. It's just everything's happened because of the Big Bang. That's it.
well,
Nothing more, nothing
yeah.
less.
Well, like here's the thing though, is like, yeah, you can contribute someone's environment to said actions, right? But
Yeah,
with
yeah, yeah,
everything, there should be a balance because you have, well, I like to call control over
yeah,
small things in your life. You don't have control over any big stuff, right?
yeah, yeah.
Um, or the stuff out of your reach. So when you take that with self responsibility, right?
Yes.
in a play.
Well, of course. And well, for me, it's just like this is the thing. This is a open and shut case from my perspective. Is either we're moral agents or we're not. I just don't see how there can be that middle ground where it's like, oh well, but everything's dictated by the nature or Big Bang or whatever. And then, but there's all these things we can do to reform our legal system, or the legal system somehow accommodates for moral agents or agency in general for there to even be a prosecuting process. Like, what does a lack of agency mean in criminality? It's like, is everyone just a boulder rolling down the hill, just doing random stuff? Like, then they have no personal agency and they're just like beholden to the laws of nature, like gravity, and they just go and crush that person because then there's just no purpose to criminality whatsoever or morality in general. If everyone's just like the rock rolling down the hill, then it doesn't matter if someone pushed the rock down the hill to kill somebody or the rock just, you know, organically, naturally rolling down the hill because of gravity, and then, this person happened to be in the way. It just, yeah, to me, it just there's no separation, there's no distinction. So yeah, if you want to have criminality at all, you have to have agency. If there's no agency, there's no criminality, there's no morality. You can't prosecute robots and rocks because they're not agents. You can prosecute human beings because they're
Well,
agents.
yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't know. I guess I have a philosophy of balance
Yeah.
in general, but that's about
Mhm.
it.
Like compatibilism
Um,
of some sort, you're saying?
yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Look.
Well, no, it's not really. It's not really compatibilism. It's just no. It's just like life in general. It's just balance of
Okay.
life. What do you think, Playmore, on self responsibility? I know you've had a little bit. You probably want to add to it.
Is that a question for me? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
What do you think about I guess for self responsibility?
I mean, this is where I differ from a lot of people on the left. I've done a video on my channel where I talked about personal responsibility versus environmental influences. And I can acknowledge that there are certain environmental influences that you can't really escape. But at the end of the day, I always make the argument if you grow up in the West and you have access to internet and stuff like that, then you can probably gain a lot of free knowledge out there and probably accomplish what you want to in life when it comes to just having a little bit of discipline and having a little bit of self-responsibility. Now, how you actually gain that personal responsibility and that discipline, that you have to do through life, through your own personal experiences, and it requires different things to do with different people. But at the end of the day, I think that most people have that capability, but people on the left are, I don't know, for some reason downplaying personal responsibility
Yes.
in
100%.
a very stupid way. And I don't know if you heard my point before about the whole Jordan Peterson thing. That's one thing he always
Yes.
preaches is
Yes.
personal
Yes.
responsibility, and that's why I think a
Oh,
lot of people on the
100%.
left hate him.
100%.
And I could
100%.
go on for hours about this, but I just don't
Yes.
understand why the left is so against personal responsibility.
Well,
Because I made this example prior of
can, can
like
I
maybe if
can I
yeah.
can I unpack that because this is one of my favorite points because I'm thoroughly left, right? Like I'm the true left. I'm like so let me unpack this a little bit. So in America, I think the concept of left necessarily entails liberalism. Am I right? Like you guys are American,
Yeah,
so you can, yeah.
true.
Yeah.
So liberalism is not a left notion. It's not a left idea. So I'm a graduate in public policy. Nearly finished my master's in it, but just quit at the end. So my thesis was predicated on one of these ideas. Liberalism is anti-left. Left, traditionally speaking, politically speaking, the left wing is all about equality, egalitarianism. That's what the left is about. So whether it be economic equity, whether it be like social equity, all those different things like fairness, those kind of things. These are the measures of the left wing. The right wing is all about liberalism. So we have civil liberties in the quote unquote right wing in America, which is like the Republican wing and all those sort of guys. Like the ANCAPs, they're all about civil liberties. They're like, oh, we should have freedom of speech. We should have freedom of the free market. We should have free this, free that, free that. Whereas the left, this quote unquote left in America, the liberals, the Democrats, they're about individual liberties. So I should be able to have my preferred pronouns given to me. I should be able to have sex with whoever I want. I should have the choice to this, like individual liberties. That's the only difference. But both classical liberalism as an idea is a right-wing idea. Equality, democracy, or equity, equality is a left-wing idea. So you can have authoritarianism of the state. That's why in leftist wings, so communism and like just general ideas that they're predicated upon laws. So America actually has this schizophrenic idea in the democratic left wing of America in American society, because they tend to think that somehow equality and individual liberty are compatible. They're absolutely not. They're contradictions in terms. You cannot have equality and individual liberty, because individual liberty necessarily entails that you should be able to practice in the free market. And if you're in the free market, you're going to have unrestrained free market. You're going to have people who are earning X amount of money, which unequalizes society. So there's going to be some people who are richer, some people are poorer, and then the whole democratic process just falls through. Because this was something I learned in my first lecture in political science, was that liberal democracy is a contradiction in terms. That it's like saying hot cold, because democracy entails equalized power, equalized say, civil power. You have equal pockets of power. So every individual in your country has the same amount of power, democratically speaking. But liberty entails that there's no such thing. It's based on your capacity. So if you just make it somehow to becoming a billionaire, then you're going to have your billions of dollars. And if you happen not to be able to do that, then you're poor. Then that's your own deal. Like, it's just individual liberty. You should have the freedom to take part in the market and do what you will with it. But that's the opposite of democracy. So democracy entails equal power. So if, let's say, Jeff Bezos went to the elections, for example, or like in Australia, it's a little bit simpler because all our richest corporates are all media householders. So Rupert Murdoch's in Australia and Kerry Packer. These guys own the biggest private media corporations in Australia. That's called News Corp and what's the other one? I forget the other one's name. But yeah, so each of their news organizations control about 1 million votes in Australia individually. So News Corp controls about 1 million votes just through its newspaper publications, probably a million more and its TV media and all that other stuff, internet media and so on and so forth. So the stakeholders who run these private corporations control upwards of 5 million votes in the country. Me as an individual, I don't even control 5 votes in my life. Like, I can't tell 5 people if maybe I can influence 5 other friends of mine that you should vote for the party that I want you to vote for. I think these guys are good or whatever. So there's a complete inequality in the democratic process. Someone, because of their liberty, can influence millions upon millions of votes, whereas most individuals in society cannot influence more than a handful of votes if they can. So it's a complete disbalance. So liberty and democracy are the opposites. So what happens in America is the liberal left Democrat wing is going through this schizophrenic thing. So sometimes they approach the equality thing, like capitalism's not great, we should have mixed economies, tepid leftist ideas. Well, we're Democrats, we believe in the democratic process. But they don't see the hypocrisy, like the contradiction in that, that they're also preaching for individual liberties, and you can't have individual liberties that coincide with democracy, because democracy is the necessary tyranny of the majority. So if somebody votes in that, we shall not have gay marriage, for example, that's why we have this gay marriage thing, or abortion bills and all that sort of stuff. If the majority votes against these things, it's just a tyranny majority. I'm sorry, that's how it works. But so you can't be a Democrat and then be for individual liberties, because if the individuals who form the minority, and sometimes it can be a very small minority, which is 51% to 49%, so it's only 2% difference between the majority stakeholders and the minority, then you're going to have the minority stakeholders who are getting completely ripped off, which takes the wind out of the sails out of the individual liberty guys. So it just doesn't make any sense. So you're in a weird conundrum there. And that's where Jordan Peterson, I think, comes into play. Like, but he himself is a bit of a contradiction in terms, because how he actually came into the public space, and I actually respected him when he first came in, was when he started challenging individual liberties. Like, like we have the point of linguistics is social communication. If you start inventing pronouns, if you start saying random shit like I'm this, I'm that, I'm Z, D, G, whatever, like random things, and people are just supposed to know that and accommodate for that, it just doesn't make sense. So you need to have personal responsibility and social responsibility, collectivist responsibility when you're in space. But then he did a flip. He did a flip later on where he says, like the individual identity is primary and the collective identity is secondary. It's like, well, yeah, that's what the feminists were saying when they were saying we can invent,
Yeah.
pronouns by the day, and and you're like, oh, that's bullshit. We should work in a collectivist way. And where I actually agree with Peterson and what you were saying, Playmore, is that I actually hang out with a lot of quote quasi-socialists in my circles. A lot of my friends are quote unquote socialists, but they're more in that individual liberties camp, and they don't because they haven't studied political science. They're mostly philosophers or other disciplines. They tend to not understand this basic contradiction. So what ends up happening is actually the worst kind of liberty, the worst kind of capitalism. So it's you have this idea, what rather than what can I do for my collective, for my society, what can the collective do for me? A lot of them, these people, like that, a lot of them are unemployed because of, some of them have mental illnesses, some of them just are like, oh, I don't want to participate in capitalism. But then they just demand from the state things like, well, we should have better public healthcare. Australia actually has pretty decent public healthcare. We have pretty decent public education. We have all these social incentives, which a lot of the, other nations don't have, especially America and so forth, so on and so forth. But they're like, oh no, we need to have better. It needs to be better. And they're basically saying the state, the government, the collective should do more for them as individuals, whereas they do not contribute jack squat all to anybody else. And that's where Peterson, I think, makes really good point. Like we end up having a weird kind of socialism because of this individual liberties nonsense, with the American left wing and American politics, where people are like, oh, the state, it's all about society doing shit for me. They should recognize my pronouns. They should allow me more, safe, whatever, abortion tools or whatever, all these things. Society, what can the society do better for me? It's never about what can I do for the society, or maybe I need to conform to some societal standards, or maybe I need to
Exactly.
conform to something. So
Mhm.
why the fuck, would the society do anything for you? So you end up being actually worse than the civil liberties guys who are like the capitalists, the right wing ANCAPs, all those guys who are like, yeah, well, you sink or you sink or you swim. It's up to you. If you fail, no one else has a responsibility towards you, which I think is bullshit because I'm a left winger. But even that's better than the individual liberties guys who are supposed to be the American left wing, who are like, no, everyone else needs to do shit for me. I don't need to do jack squat all for you. Where's the person? What are you doing for? Like, so I always say to my friends, and we always get into heated scuffles about this, is that, like, what? Well, yeah, sure, you don't want to participate in the capitalist market. Why don't you go and feed the homeless? Why don't you donate blood? Why don't you do some pro-social things, collectivist things for your community? Why don't you go and like fill in the holes in the road, or like cement the road? Why don't you do some pro-social things for free? Go and help an orphanage. Go and help
Well,
like
I think
elderly
typically
home.
it comes down to the primary thing of incentive, right? Incentive.
Yeah,
See,
yeah,
people
yeah.
are fucking lazy.
Yeah,
If I don't have an
exactly.
incentive to walk down to Walmart, I'm not going to walk down to
Right,
Walmart.
right, 100%.
Uh,
But then you can't
but
demand this of the state, right? You can't say, well, what
but
incentive
yeah,
does the state have
yeah.
to look after the dead weights in the society?
Typically, people are really correct when they say you reap what you sow.
Yes.
So if a society
Yeah.
if we all work like a cog in a machine,
Mm,
and this machine works as it should,
mm.
we should be able to achieve anything, right?
Yes,
But
yes, correct.
the thing is we as human beings are individuals, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
all prone to breaking.
Yes.
We're very fragile and around.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and with that comes people that will want power more than the others.
Yes.
And this is why I feel like we can't go too far in the socialist route when it comes to
Mm.
maybe communism or so forth, because people suck working together.
Yeah, I understand, but I mean, but my issue is like I'm not even in the like I'm sort of suggesting a more collectivist output. I mean, now this is going back to Playmore's point about Peterson taking responsibility for oneself and then your greater community as well. Like what can you do for other people? What can you do for like it almost so it. To me, the individual liberties camp, which is supposed to be the left wing, it just seems to be about selfishness, which they accuse the so-called right wing in America of, but it seems to be worse than them. But at least
Well,
the right wing in America are
well,
saying,
yeah, of
well,
course,
let's
it's
take
all
responsibility. So if
hypocrisy
you
at
if
its
you fuck
finest.
if you yeah if you fuck up, then it's because you didn't do something right, and if you succeed, then you reap all the rewards, which is I don't think is right. I mean, obviously as a
Yeah.
left winger, but I think that's better. That's closer to my position than
Well, yeah. I find
someone
though
saying,
that
what can everyone else do for me? I don't
I
even need
think
to
the
work.
commune idea, the way you have it, is I like it
Yeah.
because it's we all take responsibility for each other, and if
Yeah.
a downturn comes to worst, we're all responsible for it.
Yes.
Now, when it comes to I would say the average socialist, or I guess even the average person in America, in like on the left, I'll have like one idea that's somewhat similar to the right, and they
Mhm.
will, I guess, attack me for it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Saying I'm
because
not a true lefty or some bullshit. I'm just like,
I think that's because
you're gonna have some opinions that differ.
yeah. Well, I think that's the reason for that is that they're not actually. So I'm not even that much into democracy, to be honest. Even though, like I was saying, so I actually diverge a lot from the left myself because I actually believe in the meritocracy. So I believe that every individual in society should be able to contribute to the political process, but only in the specialities that they possess. So let's say like Playmore might be into, I don't know, like automation or something, and mechanics or whatever.
Close.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you can correct me or whatever you do, like whatever's your interest.
Cybersecurity, but yeah.
Yeah, okay, cybersecurity. So your process, like your democrat, actually this was the paper I was writing when I was doing my masters, is that there's a thing called RCT, rational choice theory, which is a capitalist. It's Adam Smith. I don't know if you guys are aware of who Adam Smith is. He's the father
Yep.
of capitalism. So he basically said that he has the concept of invisible hand. So he says that when people become 18, when you become an adult, most people in society are rational actors after they turn 18. So they can do the cost benefit analysis. They can say, this is the best thing for me. They'll do sufficient research on all the decisions they make in their life, and because of that, the market, which is an invisible entity, will correct itself. Because if we leave it to the people, they'll just make the right decisions most of the time because because they're selfish, and they want the best for themselves. So they'll always do the sufficient research. They'll do the right things. Um, Hence, we need the rational choice theory. So we need to have members of society making rational choices after they're 18 to dictate where the market goes. But as I was writing, and I worked for a political party in Australia for a couple of years after I graduated, and then I did my masters. And we did research in this, is how much does the average person know, and we only did about bureaucracy, but actually the market research shows the same thing, that people know about 4% on average on every decision they make, whether it be bureaucratic or market based. So when they go and buy a product, so let's say you're buying an iPod, the typical process of running a cost benefit analysis would be getting all the products that in the range that you're looking for as much as you humanly can. So you look at all the possibilities. So you have iPods, you might have some Google device, you might have some other players in the thing. You look at all the possible options. You watch sufficient material, or you read enough stuff about what the options are, and what the specialities of each product is, the cost. Run a cost benefit analysis, basically. How much does this thing cost? How much does this thing cost? Have a database of all those things, then run like what its features are. Then you do which one's got the best features for the least amount of money, and then you go and buy that thing. But majority of us don't do that with almost any decisions that we make. We usually just like marketing works on familiarity. So whatever we're familiar with. So if it's Apple, we'll just go and buy an iPod. If most people own a Google thing, we'll just buy that. We'll buy an Android. We'll buy whatever Microsoft product, whatever. We're not going to run the the cost benefit analysis. So if the whole system is predicated upon the cost benefit analysis theory that you're going to run a rational choice based on doing the appropriate amount of research, then you're not doing it. So what's the point? And same thing happens in bureaucracy. So if
Well,
you look at policy papers that each government official releases
so
during the election.
basically, the premise of the capitalistic guy
Yes.
relies upon human rationality as an actor,
Correct.
which
And
again
and
is
same with
flawed because we're not
it's
rational,
bullshit. You're
especially when
not.
you're
And
18.
or any time in your life, for example. And this is the average, man. It's like 4% on average on any decision you make, whether it be bureaucratic. So when you go voting for somebody, how much of the material, policy papers, which are available online, and wherever, if you want to go and research what the policies are of the people you're electing, nobody gives a shit about it. Like I literally did door to door campaigning, door knocking, and asking people if they knew about our policies. And the people that even were going to vote for us, they didn't know jack squat all. It's 4%.
Well, yeah,
And
true.
if you look at a rational decision, this is the best analogy I could give. So if you're going skydiving, to be a rational actor in skydiving, how
Yeah.
much of the risk would you have to know? Oh, and I would say the number is 50% and above. You need to know at least 50% of the risks of skydiving for it to be a rational
Mhm.
thing. Otherwise, you're just being
Well,
irrational, just
if I may
jumping over the
ask, with
cliff.
meritocracy, like,
Yeah.
so have you heard of the concept of aristocracy?
Yeah,
Aristocracy?
I have, yeah. Aristocracy.
Yeah.
Well,
So how
that's a,
does meritocracy not descend into aristocracy?
well, aristocracy just by birth, right? So you're born into an aristocratic household. So you know, you're
Yeah.
born to a lord. You're born into this. Meritocracy is still it's a free process. So if you go and learn about a topic, if you work in the field, if you have some kind of I don't know
I guess I can get behind it.
like social capital, yeah, then your vote should contribute towards that. Like I have jack shit knowledge about cybersecurity, for example. My vote, like let's say this was an important issue in the next election in my country, my vote shouldn't count towards that because I know jack squat all. I know less than
Well,
4%. That and
typically
if
speaking, then who's going to govern, right? Um, will they
well,
like pass laws and
so yeah,
incentives
the
based on?
people who are governing those separate fields. So let's say you're a health minister, for example, then you need to work in the health industry, and you have to have some kind of success in the health industry, and you can only run for that position. You can't run for the position of aeronautical science because you have nothing to do with it. You can't run for the economics minister. You can't run for the position of whatever else. There's all these different positions in ministry, a tourism minister or whatever. You might have a bunch of different positions available. But if you don't have anything to contribute in that field in terms of your social capital, in your
Do,
academic capital, in your experience, then you should not even be able to run for that field. It just makes no
do
sense. And
you
yeah.
do you think that the I guess maybe the called will any of the will any of their like interests collide or clash with each other?
Well, yeah, I mean, so that happens anyway, right? Like even in the current, so we in bureaucracy, you're trying to minimize issues, or they call them policy failures, right? So or governance failures, which arise because of these tensions between different entities, different fields. But
Yeah.
the thing is, you're trying to minimize them, not maximize them. So if you're going to vote for Arnold Schwarzenegger, who can't speak English properly and has no understanding of the bureaucratic process, and you make him into a governor because he was the Terminator or because he was, whatever movie you liked of his The Twin, what, and that's his social capital to bring to the table. It's just not worthy enough. Like you're not going to hire like a movie star to perform heart surgery on you. Why should bureaucracy be any different? Why should the market anything
True.
like this it just doesn't make any sense. But because this game is about popularity contest, that's what ends up happening. These people who are good rhetoricians. They're not even good logicians like people like Trump and stuff, but they're good at rhetoric. They're good at like, oh, make
Yeah.
America great again. Let's kiss as much ass of Americans so they love me. Like that's all. And these are just
Yeah.
empty platitudinal statements. They mean nothing in bureaucracy. If you talk to someone that studied politics, it's just waffle. It's nothing. It's just empty
Hmm.
statements. Oh, America's the greatest country ever made. Let's make it great again. Let's make America like the pride of the world. It's just empty. It's just bullshit. It's like a church service where they just say motivational slogans. Like, oh, live in the light of Christ. Let's do this. Like it just means nothing. It's got nothing, no substance.
Well, typically that's why the most charismatic people rule. But
Yeah,
also, what do
exactly.
you think about this system, Playmore?
Yeah, yeah. I'll go and check up on my food again. Actually.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, if you really want to get into it, when it comes to like at least American democracy, it seems to be a popularity contest at the end of the day. You mentioned Trump, and that's the exact reason he won is because of he was popular and he kissed enough people's ass, and people in the United States thought like, oh yeah, he's obviously a charismatic dude. He knows what he's talking about. But in reality, like, what did he really do in his presidency that we can remember now? Not a lot. He didn't get a lot done. And even the small things he did get done, he would boast about for endless amount of times, whether that was on his Twitter when he had one, or it was just in his rallies or press conferences or
Yeah.
whatever. He would boast about he did this little thing and he would make it seem a lot bigger than it was, but in reality, he didn't really do much. And yeah, I
So,
mean, it's a popularity contest.
so what about like meritocracy? Do you like the idea of that type of government, or what type of government would you like to go for if it was, these social issues? or socialist issues, I should say.
I mean, when it really comes down to it, I think all of them have their positives and negatives, and I think that if you look at it, a meritocracy could be quite sufficient in the United States. But at the end of the day, I think it could present new problems that weren't in democracy before. Uh, and again, we have our system we have today of democracy that we've been using in the United States since the foundation of it, like 250 years ago. So again, just swapping a system is not. I think it would be too big of a change to even like consider or think about like what would actually fix or not fix. And again, unless you're like an absolutely America hater, United States hater, again, I don't think any rational person in the United States would be like, yeah, let's just switch
Switch to
systems or
this.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, but like I think gradually though, I think we should switch to a social democracy more so
I mean,
than
I agree. I don't think it'll happen, but yeah, I'll agree with you.
yeah. I think it's more of like a case by case basis of what country should be in what government system more
Yeah, of
so,
course.
but mainly just due to cultural reasons um, and
Hmm.
geography in general.